Coming up on 101 Sports.
A flawed investigation in Tallahassee, rule changes abound in the NCAA, and the Knicks are getting a new coach.
Plus, our NBA and NHL experts talk playoffs, and we take an in-depth look at the wide receiver position in the upcoming NFL draft.
All that and more. 101 Sports starts right now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of 101 Sports. I'm Jake Soder.
And I'm Ryan Ballack. Easter weekend is officially in the books, so don't expect Jake or I to be laying any eggs today. Here's starting five.
In a recent investigative piece published by the New York Times, journalist Walt Bogdanich took an in-depth look at the rape investigation involving star Florida State quarterback Jameis Winston. Bogdanich, after months of research and probing, has come to the conclusion that the investigation had many flaws, and that the investigating officers didn't go through all the necessary measures to effectively rule out Winston as a suspect. He writes that the Tallahassee Police Department took measures to cover up the investigation in order to keep their star football player out of the negative spotlight. Ryan, first question is, how widespread do you think this problem is? And second of all, what are your reactions to this particular story?
Well, I really hope this is not a big widespread thing around college football. I mean, FSU has had problems with illegally recruiting players, and they've gotten some scholarship bans, but this is taking it to a whole nother level. I mean, this is pretty much putting a freshman quarterback who maybe 18, 19 years old above the law. You can't do that at a public university, especially as big as FSU.
I completely agree, and I really hope that it's not more of a widespread problem, but I really wouldn't be. I really wouldn't be surprised if it was. We see college football players getting in trouble all the time. It makes you wonder what kind of things are covered up that we don't ever hear about.
I mean, especially at a school in another school in Florida. I mean, Miami. You can't tell me that stuff didn't happen with Deion Sanders and all those guys. I mean, there are a lot of I hate to say this word, but thugs in college football, and I'm sure there have been a lot of issues that have been covered up for the years.
Yeah, no doubt. And in a place like Tallahassee, where Florida State football is it, you got places like Athens, Georgia, not to name specifics, but places like that.
Those SEC schools.
You never know what can happen.
Dabo Swinney and Clemson's football program has been under fire this week from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, an organization that works to promote the constitutional principle of separation between church and state. The foundation is upset because Clemson hired team chaplain James Trapp. Trapp was given access to the entire team in between drills for Bible study last season, and at times has organized and led sessions on being baptized in the athletic building. So, Jake, does voluntary religious practice have a place in college athletics?
I don't think that we are in the position to say whether or not it should or shouldn't be. I think it should be up to the coach who runs the program, Dabo Swinney. Everybody knows pretty much that he's a very religious man.
Especially at Clemson.
If you sign on to play at Clemson in a school that's in South Carolina for a guy like Dabo Swinney, you know exactly what you're signing up for, and I think it should be up to the coach and not up to the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
And an ex-player came out and said that if you're going to go to Clemson, you better be prepared to be stepping into a Christian society. And I guess I can go in with that mindset, but I mean, I am a Jewish kid.
So am I.
And if I were in this locker room, and even if the practices, the prayers are all voluntary, you would get up and you'd feel uncomfortable. You'd see Bible verses on whiteboards. It just makes you uncomfortable. It's not a place in a public university. It shouldn't be happening, but players aren't complaining. This is just a random organization, or maybe not random, but coming and complaining. They're not involved with the school.
Right. If you saw players coming out, maybe Jewish players or players in other religions coming out, that would resonate more, especially with us. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, think about that. Freedom from religion. What about freedom of religion? In the Constitution, everybody has the right to their religion. Dabo Swinney runs that program. He can run it however he wants to. Free snacks for everyone. After the NCAA voted to eliminate food restrictions on student athletes, President of the NCAA, Mark Emmert, said that the previous rules were, quote, dumb, stupid, and absurd, and many other adjectives you'd be surprised to hear a president say about a rule his organization enforced. Despite the timing of the rule change, Emmert said it has nothing to do with Shabazz Napier's recent comments, saying that he would sometimes go to bed starving at night. Ryan, how much of an effect do you think Napier's comments had on this rule change?
I think it did have an effect, maybe not an enormous effect, because I think the idea of snacks was a great idea. Yep. I mean, all players love food, especially guys who are working out all day. And when a guy comes out and says he's starving every night, this is obviously a good first reaction. But I think the Northwestern unionization, I think this is all piling up, and the NCAA reacted very quickly, and Shabazz definitely helped. But this is a big move.
Yeah, I agree. I think Shabazz had a lot to do with it, though. I mean, going just from specifics.
Especially winning the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, you win the NCAA tournament, you make a statement like that right after or right before
the game,
and then you win it. you had to do something if you're Mark Emmert, and this was an immediate response to Shabazz Napier's comments.
How about Mark Emmert coming out and saying that his rules originally were dumb, stupid, and absurd? He changed his own rules.
Yeah, look in the mirror, dude.
New NBA Commissioner Adam Silver is wasting no time implementing new rules for the association, and there may actually be a change to the NBA NCAA player eligibility rules for the draft coming. Yes, no more one-and-dones in college basketball. Silver says pushing back the age limit to 20 years old is his top priority, and he is trying to get it done in time for the 2016 draft. It's pretty big news, Jake. What do you think about it?
I like it. I think it could go further. I think this is just 20 years old seems kind of arbitrary to me. I don't know why 20, but
I think it's 2 years in college.
I think you should go by years as opposed to age because it can vary with students.
It's experience.
If the idea is to keep kids in college, I think that's where you should go. And I like where his head's at. I understand why he's doing this. He wants kids to stay in college at least 2 years, it sounds like. But there's other ways to go about it, I think.
And we talked about this on the radio.
Yep.
And we talked about how there was actually somebody who came out and said that you might be able to get paid more for how long you stay in college. I think that's a much better idea than this because I still think kids are going to want to leave and not go to college for 2 years. This just makes them want to have to go to school and take these ridiculous fake classes for even longer. So I still think you should be allowed to come out of high school. We talked about there. I had my little rant here. But the 2 is much better than the 1, but you should still be able to come out of high school.
I think something we've been talking about maybe in the last few weeks is like if you go to college, you have to stay for at least 3 years, or you can come out before. I think that's maybe something better, but I like where his head's. I like where he's going with it.
Progress.
Mike Woodson is officially out as head coach of the New York Knicks, and the rumor mill is already starting to swirl with speculations as to who his successor will be. One of the most common names that has been brought up is current NBA broadcaster and former player Steve Kerr, who has ties with Knicks president Phil Jackson from their days together in Chicago. Ryan, is it a good move for Kerr? Is it a good move for the Knicks? Is it a good move for you?
See, let's talk about what's really important. It's important for me. But Steve Kerr, it's a pretty risky decision on Steve Kerr's part. I mean, you don't know if Carmelo Anthony's going to come back. The Knicks roster is kind of in shambles. I mean, last season was horrible. Yeah. But Phil Jackson and Steve Kerr clearly have had some sort of bond. And Phil Jackson, I feel like, until he decides to throw his name out and say that he wants to be the next coach of the New York Knicks, anybody he picks is going to be associated with him, like a guy like Steve Kerr, like a guy like Mark Jackson. I think it'll be a good hire.
Well, he's got to hire somebody that he knows is going to obey whatever he tells him to do. Which means run the triangle offense and things like that. Steve Kerr has expressed his desire to become a head coach for some time now. He's a good fit with Phil Jackson. Yeah. He's a good fit with the Knicks. He knows the game. He's got an incredibly high basketball IQ. That's why he succeeded in Chicago. I think it's a great hire.
And that's why he succeeds so well on NBA
sides.
TNT.
Yeah.
And that's really the big risk for Steve Kerr is to leave that desk job at TNT where he can go hang out with Shaq and Charles Barkley, and he can go hang out with Carmelo and the Knicks in New York.
Overall, I think it's a great hire on all sides.
Coming up, Jake and our NHL experts have a fantasy draft of playoff proportions. Stay tuned.